Hi, I'm Jack McCauley. Welcome to Petrol Lounge. Today we're talking about the Carrera GT. This is a really important piece of Porsche history. It's a car that everyone seems to love. It is just a really awesome automobile. It's a really great Porsche. It has really great history behind it. Like a lot of great Porsches in the past, like the Porsche 959, this originally starts as a race car. The 5.7 liter V10 that's in this car started as a race engine for a 1992 F1 team. Ultimately, it did not go in the race car. It did not get raced. It got put on the shelf at Porsche. They wondered what they should do about it. They thought about building a LMP car. That's where this started. They said, oh, we'll use the V10 engine. Then they decided they didn't want to compete against Audi, so everything got shelved. They turned it into a concept car for the 2000 Paris Auto Show. And then everyone loved the design. This actually is a really accurate representation of the concept car. It's really hard to tell from photos which one is which. You have to really know the car and be able to pick out some really not easily discernible details. And then when they decided, oh, there's enough interest, we'll build this car, then some of the stranger design considerations of this car came into play. One of the big design considerations that everyone wants to know about, everyone talks about, and it even got me just a few minutes ago, is the clutch in this car. Everyone talks about it, everybody wants to know about it, how difficult it is. And the rumor is that this is a $20,000, $30,000 clutch replacement if you mess it up. And that figure is not wrong. What is a little bit wrong is everyone assumes that you can just burn up the clutch like this in a parking lot 20, 30 seconds and suddenly you're out $30,000. I'm not going to say that that hasn't happened. I'm going to say that it's actually a lot more difficult to do. So to talk about the clutch, it is intimidating. When I first got in the car, I wasn't thinking about it, and then suddenly it occurred to me, oh my God, this is that fragile clutch. It's really strange. You could burn it up really quickly, and I kind of forgot how I wanted to position the car, and I had to spend some time putting it back in the right position for this video. To talk about it, it is a racing clutch. It's a multi-pack clutch, and the big problem is you can't slip this clutch like you do a normal transmission. If you do, that's where you start getting into this issue of, are you going to burn it up in a parking lot? Probably not. However, could you burn it up in a week or a weekend? Maybe, if you were, particularly careless about it. It's certainly a lot smaller than a normal clutch that you're used to seeing, and the wear on it goes much, much faster. With this clutch, the tricky thing to do is that you have to remember you have to let the computer manage the clutch. The computer is very sophisticated. It'll handle it just fine. All you have to do is not use the throttle at the same time that you're using the clutch. And the computer will figure it all out. If you dump the clutch, it'll give you enough throttle to get the car moving. If you come off very slowly, it'll manage all the throttle inputs. It will handle everything. But if you decide that you are going to use the throttle at all, or you're going to balance it out or feather the clutch like you would in a normal car, the computer says, oh, you must know what you're doing. And that's when you end up with no computer assistance, and you can quickly spin the clutch. And you're not going to damage it the first time you do it or the second time you do it, but definitely if you continue doing this, it's really easy to damage the clutch, and then you're going to be sad. It's going to be very expensive. Again, you also have to remember this when you're driving it on the freeway. When you shift from third to fourth, again, you don't want to use the throttle and the clutch at the same time. You just want to get off the throttle, push in the clutch, make your shift, get off the clutch. Then you can use the throttle again normally. It's really not too bad. It just requires you to kind of think and be mindful of the car you're in and what you're doing and how the car operates. So I have driven several Carrera GTs, not this particular one, but I can tell you that once you're mindful of the car and you know what you're in, it's really not a difficult car to drive. You will adapt to it pretty quickly, and the clutch operates like a normal clutch other than the throttle inputs, and you can drive it pretty normally. Speaking of driving the car, the other thing that a lot of people talk about this car is that it has this reputation as not just being a widowmaker, but being a particularly nasty car to drive. And I don't mean in the sense that you won't like driving the car, but that the car doesn't respond well to certain inputs and that it will constantly try to trick you. And you can quickly end up in a ton of trouble in this car. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you. Actually, this car has a lot of power. It's got 603 horsepower. And I don't care what car you're driving with that kind of horsepower. If you do something dumb, if you ask the wrong thing of the car, you can wind up in a lot of trouble. This car is no exception, and it is a particularly dynamic car. It moves around a lot as you're driving it. And it supposedly has traction control and stability control. My experience is when you get the car a little bit out of sorts, the light on the dash will flash at you and tell you, hey, you're losing traction, but it doesn't actually do anything. The car is still kind of walking around on you and doing what it wants to do. So you also have to be mindful of that. But when you actually get down to driving the car, it really is, I don't want to say it's an easy car to drive. It expects you to be a driver. But if you know what you're doing behind a car, it's not tricky. The car does what you tell it to do, and it responds in very predictable ways to your inputs. And if you're an accomplished driver, you really shouldn't get into trouble with this car. Not really. The reputation is not what the car actually is. And again, I would say it's not what you should expect from Porsche either. Now, everyone's going to talk about Paul Walker and the crash and how all that happened. And what I'm going to tell you in that regard is there was one big problem with this car, and that is that Michelin did not make tires for this car for about 10 years. And performance tires, if you just let them sit around, a lot of people don't think about this. They look at the tire, they're like, oh, I've got plenty of tread. It's fine. Yes, but those tires do age out, and performance tires in particular, if they're 5, 6, 7 years old, 10 years old, they're going to be really hard, and the grip that you get from the tires is really unpredictable. I know someone that tried to drive their Carrera GT on the original tires. Very accomplished racer, won a bunch of trophies. He went about 4 miles down the street, brought the car back and said, this car is undrivable in this state, and pulled the wheels off and took them to the shop to have the new tires mounted on. That's literally how bad the tires were, and I think a big contributing factor to the accident that everyone wants to talk about. It's not the car, it's not how nasty the car is, it's that, with old performance tires, you could get into a corner and 10 minutes ago, you had all the grip in the world, and now all of a sudden you have no grip at all, and it is completely unpredictable what you will get from one moment to the next. So I'm not surprised that it happened, but at the same time, I wouldn't fault this car. A lot of people ask me about the wheels on this car. They're very distinctive, they're very different. They've become a little more common with most of the GT3s and GT2s now have this kind of center lock wheel. But you'll notice this cap here is blue. On the other side, it's red. And this shows you which way you need to rotate the cap, because this one is normal. This is a righty-tighty. As you lock it down in a normal way, just like everything else that any bolt you've ever fastened in your life. On the other side, it's just the opposite. So it is a lefty-tighty, righty-loosey. And the reason for that is because as the car drives, there's a torque on this nut, and you want it to actually tighten the nut over time. So as the car moves forward, it will actually try to tighten this nut. And it's the same on the other side with the reverse thread. If it was normally threaded, it would actually attempt to back that nut off the whole time that you're driving the car. You do have a special tool inside the front bonnet to actually put on this, because you have to get a whole lot of torque on this nut to get it on or off. It's about 250 foot-pounds of torque, if I'm not mistaken. And it requires a big lever and a special gear and a special little locking cap to put on here to get these wheels on and off. It's not a trivial exercise. Up front is your trunk space, which really isn't that big. It's not designed for your luggage. It's really just designed for the roof panels that go on the car. And they have a neat little nesting layout here. And once you get them in, there's even a strap that you put over the top to lock these down in place. And it's right here. And it just latches over this and holds everything down so that while you're driving, these panels don't lift up, they don't come out. But really, as a luggage space, it's not very practical. Again, this car was not designed to be it's not even a GT cruiser. It was designed to be a race car. It was originally designed to be an LMP car. And so things like luggage space just really weren't a consideration with this car. So unlike every other Porsche, which I usually say, you know, a Porsche is good for everything. They assume it's your only car and you can do everything with it. This is actually a Porsche that you really can't do everything with. You have to be very mindful of the fact that, hey, you know, I'm not going to go to the store and get groceries in this, or I'm not going to take it, you know, 1,000 miles cross country unless I'm going to ship my luggage there and meet it at the hotel. Speaking of living with this car, there's a few things kind of unique to the ownership experience on this car that also harken back to its racing roots, kind of prototype roots. The spoiler is one of them. A lot of spoilers like this will actually have two motor mechanisms, one on each side, or they'll use the motor mechanism to lift both sides simultaneously. This car has one motor mechanism, and only one side really, quote unquote, works in the traditional way. So if this wing is not utilized very often, if you don't periodically send it up and down, this side can get sticky. Sometimes it will stick in the upper position, sometimes it will stick in the lower position. But what will happen is you'll go to operate the wing. This side will move normally and come up. This side will hang up and you'll end up with a tilted wing. Or it'll be up like this, you'll go to put it down. This side will stay up, this side will go down. It's a little bit embarrassing. Luckily, the easy fix for it is you just keep operating the wing. You keep letting it kind of hang up and get hung up. And after a few times of operation again, this side will start working again, and then it will lower and raise just normally like always. Something else we have to be mindful of here with this car, again, being an unusual car, you never ever want to let the battery in this car go dead. It is in a really inaccessible part of the car and requires special tools to get to if the battery dies completely. That is literally a multi-$1,000 job at Porsche, and you'll have to have the car towed down there, and it will take them probably a full day to pull everything out, get to the battery, replace your battery. It is a really big deal, and there aren't any good spots that you can jumper the car from, that you can get it operating again. It really is, like, if the battery goes dead, it's a big deal. And unfortunately, you know, this is the kind of car that you don't drive every day. You don't drive every week. Probably, if it's in your collection, you don't drive it every month. But if you don't have it on a battery tender, if you don't come out and periodically start it, you could suddenly find yourself facing $2,000, $3,000 just on a simple mistake. But again, we're talking about a car that's really more of a prototype than an actual production car. So these are the kind of things that you kind of have to be somewhat forgiving of in a car of this nature. Okay, going inside the car now. This is, again, another departure from Porsche. Porsche is really fond of reusing parts, and a lot of times in Porsche automobiles, as you dig around, you'll find that parts are made for other vehicles other than the one they're currently in. And you can usually tell that by looking at the part number. For example, if it starts with 996, that is a part that was originally designed for the Porsche 996 911. Or if it says 997 or 991, those are different generations of the 911. Or if it says 987, that was a part originally designed for the Cayman. A lot of the parts in the interior of this car are bespoke, particular to this automobile. Porsche didn't do that a whole lot, but they did do it here. Interesting thing, They did not get the formulation right on the carbon fiber panels on the doors. It really involves the resin that they used, and it is susceptible to UV light. So what you will find on a lot of these is that there's a little bit of yellowing. Some of these cars have more yellowing than others. A lot of it depends on how much time it has spent in the sun. The more time that the car spends outside, the more these panels will yellow just a little bit. It is common to these cars. It is normal. You will see it on all of them. Occasionally you'll see the rare one where it didn't happen much, or the resin was just a little less susceptible to the UV light and didn't yellow as much. But you can see it here. It has yellowed just a little bit. And you'll notice on the door sills where they're protected from the UV light, there's no discoloration whatsoever. So it's not a time thing. It is literally a UV light issue. For a car that doesn't have a lot of practicality and a lot of storage space inside, there's not really map pockets or anything like that. There is a really unique compartment here on the door that, and it's just about big enough for a small travel-sized umbrella, but most people don't know it's there, and you could definitely hide away quite a bit of stuff inside the door of your Carrera GT. Now that we're actually inside the Carrera GT, it's actually a really comfortable place to be in. One of the things that I've always loved about Porsche is they design their cars to be very usable cars. This is one of the least practical, least usable Porsches that I have been in. You don't have a lot of space. There's not the map pockets. There's not a storage space up front. You're not going to do a lot of things with this car. Also, visibility in this car, especially for a Porsche, is very limited. If you're backing up into a space, you're probably going to want a spotter. But really, being in the cockpit here doesn't require a lot of compromises. For a lot of cars of this nature, you'll find the pedal box is shifted off to one side, or maybe the steering wheel isn't centered, or there's just not a lot of room. Now, granted, I'm not a big guy, but I have plenty of room here in the cockpit, and bigger people do as well. You can be a reasonably sized human being, or even a large-sized American, fit in this driver's seat and feel comfortable in the car. There's plenty of room. As a Porsche, everything you need to know is right front and center. You've got the tachometer right in front of you. The gauges are really legible. You have the standard Porsche steering wheel and some of the switch gear behind it, which make it pretty familiar if you're familiar with a Porsche automobile. Getting in this and driving it, I'm not going to say that you ever forget what you're in, but it's about as normal as you're going to get in a car like this, which is really wonderful. The shifter is also a nice little touch. It is a homage back to the 917 race car, one of my favorite Porsches of all time, actually. And it mimics the balsa wood shifter that was found in that car for lightness. It looks a little out of place in this cockpit because you have everything super modern in here, and then you have this weird little bit of wood trim, and everyone asks about it. They're like, oh, that looks strange. And this is why it's here. Just above that, you'll also find all of these cars are numbered. This is number 381. Porsche made about 1,200 of these. They expected to make 1,500. They said that the reason that they quit making the cars was airbag requirements in the US changed, and they couldn't meet the new airbag requirements in this particular car. Honestly, I think a lot of it had to do with, surprisingly, demand for this car was not as high as Porsche anticipated. And I think they sold a little over 1,200 and went, I think we've sold all the ones that we can sell, all the ones we want to sell. And it was a convenient excuse to just end production of a car that doesn't really necessarily fit the normal Porsche mold of this is a car you can always use. And, we've reused a lot of parts. This was, I don't want to say it was a difficult car for Porsche to build, I don't know, but definitely it required some extra handling that Porsche doesn't normally do. It does not have a lot of features that you would maybe expect in a car of this vintage. Granted, this is 2004. You don't really have a lot of Bluetooth audio or navigation systems or backup cameras, but they did exist. You do not find them in this car. You have a very simple radio system. you know, very simple climate control system. This is a really bare bones supercar. And it is one of the things I do love about the car, driving it around. It's very much one of the last truly analog supercars that you'll ever drive. It does have a true manual transmission. There's no paddle shifters here. It's very alive. It moves around a lot while you drive it. It's very engaging as a driver. And everything that you do with this car is on you. It's not the computer managing some trickery behind the scenes to make you faster or help you get around the corner. It's just you and the car. And until I drove one of these, this wasn't one of my favorite Porsches. I didn't really understand the car. But after I drove it, I can say being behind the wheel of one of these is truly magical. It's a wonderful, unique experience that it's just unmatched. And one of the most magical things about this car is really the sound that it makes when it starts up. The sound of this engine is really unique, really incredible. This is the key for the Carrera GT. Again, another bespoke item on this car. This looks like no other Porsche key. Thank you for spending time with us here at Petrol Lounge. I'm Jack McCauley. I'm really happy to be able to present this Carrera GT to you today. As you've seen, we have a little bit of a different perspective on cars here. We actually take care of these cars for their owners, so we really do get to know the cars and know how they drive, how they operate, what it's actually like to live with these cars. And we've got a lot more content coming your way, so definitely click like and subscribe and just watch this space. We're going to be coming with a lot more videos soon. Thank you for watching.